If you've ever been on eBay or to a hobby stop or train show, chances are you have seen one of these engines. The Rivarossi Fairbanks Morris Sealiner is considered to be one of the most hated engines ever created, and while that might be a little bit too harsh, it's not a stretch to see why. To give a little bit of history, Rivarossi originally came up with the tooling for these sea liners in 1954, and importation to the US started in 1956 under Lionel. Rivarossi themselves stopped producing these sea liners in Como, Italy around 1960, and instead contracted production to a Yugoslavian manufacturer. Most of the engines you will come across will be imported by AHM and made in Yugoslavia by what would become Mahano. AHM, founded by Bernie Paul, was the best known importer of Rivarossi engines and imported the Sealiner until the end of the company in 1982. This was not the end of the Sealiner tooling, and it was produced identically under IHC through the 90s. While the IHC version did incorporate a drivetrain upgrade, the shell was virtually unchanged for close to 50 years. The HO scale shell was grossly out of proportion and sported a pilot that was big enough for the Brady Bunch to have a picnic on. Besides the pilot, the other shell details were crudely done, and the entire engine sat too short, giving it the rough appearance of a toad. Personally, I was not inclined to own a Sealiner after doing countless repairs on them for the hobby store I work at. The AHM Tempo engines come equipped with drivetrains that sound like the devil's coffee grinder. And since the model is two-axle driven, they rely on traction tires for all of their tractive effort. With the release of the Proto series of Sealiners, which have far better proportions and are fantastic models, the Rivarossi mold seemed to truly die into the pages of HO scale history, as more of a mark of mass production prowess rather than a model with significant railroading impact. At this point, you may be wondering why the title of the video implies that I bought a set of Sealiners. Well, I did. I realized that my roster was missing first-generation New York Central diesel power, and while F units can be found aplenty, it was not until browsing eBay one day that this listing came up. While the pilot and paint modifications intrigued me, for some reason I did not save the listing and I was afraid I lost it. A couple days later, I was talking to my good friend Dan, who runs a fantastic channel called Dirty Dan's Trains, about this phantom listing, and that is where we discovered the true extent of the Sealiner modding community. Long before the proto model came in with its accurate pilot and crisp paint, people like Bob Boudreau have been chopping, detailing, and repowering these engines to a more prototypical state for decades. While form hunting, pictures of wildly modified Sealiners came up, and they are absolutely fantastic. For some reason, it did not occur to me that people would sharpen their skills with these engines to create some truly incredible projects. Needless to say, after that night of digging and philosophical realizations, I recovered the listing and went ahead and bought the pair. A few days later, the gorgeous New York Central duo arrived at my door. The seller did a fantastic job packaging the engines and did state that they did not run in the listing. Upon further inspection, it was easy to see why. Even when the drive was rewired and serviced, I was still very unhappy with the pair's performance and desperately wanted to repower them. My plan was to modify a dummy Blue Box F7 chassis and re-gear it and repower it with only parts I had on hand. My justification with this project was to get a set of engines that ran as good as the proto counterpart, but at a significantly lower price. Having repaired engines for a good long while, I was by no means short on parts. The first step was to cut and stretch the original F7 chassis to fit the longer wheelbase of the Sealiner. This was accomplished with an underpowered spinny wheel of death and lots of patience because, well, I did not want to die. Both pieces of the frame were sanded and then extended using pieces of cut rail I had lying around. Since the modified shell had metal steps installed, I planned on using them as mounting points for the chassis. The stock Athearn trucks did not have gears, however, using a mixture of Proto, Athearn, and Walthers parts, they were very quickly to put together. The motor was obtained from a Proto 2000 GP38-2 that suffered from complete zinc rot. Yes, even in the more modern age, zinc rot can still be an issue. The motor itself is fantastic though, and I finally had something to use it on. While I contemplated using rubber tubing to replace the universal joints I originally intended using as drive shafts, I decided to use them anyway because my motor to truck shaft angle was virtually flat. I mounted the motor using some foam and rubber cement, and went about rewiring the frame in a manner similar to the blue box roots that it came from. Athearn trucks are very versatile, and the fact that there were two metal posts sticking up make wiring fairly straightforward. Since the front truck was isolated due to the frame extension, I went ahead and ran a wire there so my chassis would be all-wheel pickup. With the rubber cement set, I began testing and tuning. The first tests of the chassis went well, and with some more tweaking with the electrical pickup, they became very smooth. The dual flywheels really help with performance, and while geared high for a C-liner, they can operate at low speed without visible cogging or stalling. The shell then fit on after grinding down the stock Athearn fuel tank mounting tabs. Speaking of the fuel tank, the Athearn one was conveniently covered up by the C-liner's fuel tank covers, so that was not an issue. While the chassis ran smoothly on its own with the C-liner shell mounted, truck rotation was a bit of a process to work out. Eventually, though, the shell sat perfectly level on the frame and at a good height as well. I then mounted the stock truck covers by ripping them off the stock block with great prejudice and remounting them on the Athearn trucks with some superglue and styrene sheeting. All said and done, and with the addition of a headlight, this is how they turned out. In the end, I am ecstatic with how this project turned out. For under $15, I have a set of engines I can leave running for hours without worry, and more importantly, a set of engines that I can be proud of. In the future, I really want to do some more C-liner projects and learn how to do shell and paint work. That's not really something I've dabbled in before, but it's been something I've been wanting to learn. I think this is the start of a new obsession, one that I can fulfill with just a little bit of money and a lot of time and satisfaction. On a separate note, thank you all so much for watching. I realize I haven't posted a video in months, and I hope to release another video in a slightly more reasonable time frame. Before I leave you today, please enjoy some more shots of the C-liner pair at work. Thank you all, and have a nice night.